Welcome to Superhero Stuff You Should Know. It's once again the Ben Knight, the man who knows too much about Batman, along with my co-hosts.
You got it, Zach. Go ahead.
Oh,
First.
Well, shit, it's usually you first, so it's your dear old Uncle Joker's back, and we're here to talk about me, of course. Not really, we're here to talk about...
You're in two issues, Joker.
A little bit, the me with the big crooked teeth, for the long Halloween. But yes, dear old Uncle Joker, I'm just going to keep adding more adjectives as we go to the Uncle Joker.
And it's Andrew, everybody, and I think we have a bold statement warning for this episode, probably, huh, Ben?
Yes, indeed. But before we get into that, we also have a special guest returning to us, John from About Faces.
Hi, thank you so much for having me back on.
No problem. A lot of this stuff is stuff that I know that you've pointed out on your blog, and
Sure.
We just couldn't have done it without you. So,
Dude, thank you.
It is Halloween month, and it was time we talked about the most popular Halloween-related Batman comic, which is, of course, The Long Halloween.
Oh, man, look at that. It's got dates and stuff.
So this was a request actually from a fan of ours way back. Sparkageddon318 said, quote, "Say, Ben, can you all do a deep dive into Batman The Long Halloween? I'll love to hear your opinions." So here we go. I said stay tuned this upcoming Halloween, and I'm a man of my word. So here we are. So
That's
The
awesome,
Long
man.
Halloween is a 13-issue comic series written by Jeph Loeb, art by Tim Sale, letters by Comic Craft and Richard Starkings, with colors by Gregory Wright. I was about to say Jeffrey Wright, but that's a completely different person. So it is widely regarded as one of the best Batman stories of all time, as we can see here with various fan sites putting it pretty much in the top 10, if not at number 1 or 2 or 4, as we can see at Newsarama on the visuals on the YouTube. It was influential on Christopher Nolan on the Dark Knight trilogy, where he said, quote, "The Long Halloween is more than a comic book. It's an epic tragedy," which they, of course, put on the Absolute Edition for Long Halloween, because, of course, you're going to have a Christopher Nolan quote on that. It is also a favorite of upcoming Batman director Matt Reeves, saying that he basically listed that along with its sequel, Dark Victory, in a tweet on his favorite Batman stories. Another thing to consider is that the writer of The Long Halloween and Dark Victory, Jeph Loeb, was a screenwriting teacher for Matt Reeves at USC. So these two actually know each other. And The Long Halloween itself is going to be featured in a box set next year with Batman Year One and Batman Ego among the comics that inspired the upcoming movie from Matt Reeves. So
How
this
much
one's
of
a
an
big one.
inspiration were they, I wonder?
We'll see.
They put a
Maybe
new
a
edition
loose
out today.
inspiration.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see there was a new edition they put out today? A whole new cover and everything? Yeah, they had a...
Is it a whole new edition, or is that the new comic?
no, the new comic is not out yet. It's a whole new
okay.
edition that actually has Batman, Two-Face, and Jim Gordon on the rooftop with all new Tim Sale cover. So they're...
I guess that's cool.
Yeah.
If you don't already have this comic, but I feel like a lot of the fans listening in have read this.
Sure.
But as a quick recap of The Long Halloween, let's go into it. It is a comic set during Batman's early days of crime fighting. Gotham mobsters are being targeted every holiday by a serial killer called, well, for lack of creativity, Holiday. So the mobsters are slowly getting killed off, and District Attorney Harvey Dent gets corrupted along the way and becomes the famous Rogues Gallery villain Two-Face, leading the standard Rogues Gallery into taking over Gotham by the end. This storyline itself is credited for the idea of Gotham's mobsters, the ones that Bruce Wayne originally set out to fight, end up getting taken over by the standard costumed Rogues Gallery Batman villains that we're used to. So Joker, Two-Face, Penguin, Poison Ivy, even though they already exist in this storyline, except for Two-Face, they sort of become the kingpins of Gotham after all this. In terms of the mystery itself about Holiday, Holiday is originally revealed to be the mobster's son, Alberto Falcone. But a final epilogue reveals that Holiday may have actually been Harvey Dent's wife, Gilda, who killed off the mobsters so Harvey would spend more time with her and they could raise a family together. But Gilda also thinks Harvey was Holiday at one point, too. So then this whole mystery is ambiguous in terms of When was Alberto Holiday? Was he actually Holiday? Is she actually Holiday? Is she delusional? How many killers were there? Was Harvey ever Holiday? We still have no idea. There is going to be a new comic that adds more to it, but I guess there is one criticism I'm going to throw out already labeled toward this comic in terms of, not specifically from me, but just in general, of like, this is a huge mystery story where you don't really get an answer at the end, has been a criticism, but that's not the main one we'll go into. This storyline, as I said, is credited for a lot of things, but we thought we'd ask the hot button question. Is it actually overrated? So...
Well, if they've clicked and they want to hear about it.
Bold statement warning, everybody.
Oh.
Now.
Oh, God. Yeah, here we go.
This is John. This is John's feelings towards the comic combined with his anticipation of people's reactions to this, I think. Yeah. So, obviously, it's subjective in terms of whether or not you enjoy the story, but one of the big criticisms of The Long Halloween, aside from this mystery aspect that I talked about, is just how much other movies are actually copied in this comic. Some would say to the point of parody. And the other is how much other lesser-known Batman comics, ones that came out before this one, how much those are sort of remade and brought into this, one specific one that we'll bring up in the second half. So, of taking so much from other movies and comics, this then brings up the big theme for this episode. How much homage is too much homage, I think, is going to be a very important thing, because we already know Batman in himself is way more than just a homage to the Shadow in many ways. And, of course, movies are going to take things here and there from the Batman comics over the course of history. However, where does the line get drawn on that? And I think this comic is one of those where it's really interesting to talk about that. So for the first half, we're going to go into the many movie influences that were on The Long Halloween. And the second half will go into many things from the comics that this comic is credited for doing, but what other comics actually did first. And then we'll end on the episode on what you guys think on whether or not this is actually a problem, or if this is just the evolution of the comics. You know, is this how things just evolve? We just kind of eat each other in terms of all our different influences.
Got a lot of Dark Knight quotes here today, Ben.
So first off, I know that Andrew is a big fan of the title. However, the title itself may actually be a reference to a mob movie. So I did not originally think about this because I have seen this movie a long time ago, but I'll let John go a little bit into what are the connections between The Long Halloween and the Bob Hoskins British movie, The Long Good Friday.
So The Long Good Friday, this has been, I haven't heard anybody else bring this up, so I just maybe pulling out supposition here. But considering as you're going to go into all the movie stuff that Loeb brings in, to The Long Halloween, I think it's very likely that the title was meant to be a play on this film, The Long Good Friday, starring Bob Hoskins and Helen Mirren. And it is a movie about a mob kingpin who loses everything over the course of a specific period of time, a specific holiday. He goes from the top and loses it all, and betrayals happen, everything falls apart, his entire empire crumbles. And enemies come in from the outside and take everything. And it's a great movie. Just on its own, I mean, it's a great movie and one of my favorite endings of all time. Hoskins is incredible. So I feel like Loeb had before doing this, he and Sale had already become established by doing Halloween Batman specials.
Right. The Haunted Night collection.
Exactly. For they got special comics that were in the Legends of the Dark Knight line that were Halloween themed. The first was a Scarecrow story, the second was a Mad Hatter story, and the third was a Christmas Carol, but a Halloween, so a spooky carol with Batman. And so the Long Halloween was really, they'd already established themselves, and they were hits with these stories. So I just sort of just figure they already got their name doing Batman Halloween stories, and he maybe wants to do a story about a mobster losing everything over the course of a holiday. So do The Long Good Friday, but stretched out to a year and a month, so it can be a single Halloween of a sorts over the course of a whole year. Again, I'm just guessing based on that, but I personally feel like that seems to be what they're going for there.
Yeah, I can see that as well. And this kind of leads into something that just occurred to me based off of something Andrew brought up, which is it almost feels like, tell me what you think about this, Andrew. It almost feels like the gimmick of a holiday each time has less of an actual story purpose on Gilda's part and more of just an excuse to expand this upon a whole year's worth so that it fits the whole long Halloween theme.
You're saying it doesn't have much to do with Gilda at all,
Well,
really?
yeah,
Her character?
Yeah, because of the fact that it's just like, why every holiday? Like, what's the point of that gimmick?
I mean, my takeaway from this is like, it seems like they build up Calendar Man to be a big deal, and spoilers for this, right? By the way,
right.
It's for Long Halloween, but he's
You already spoiled it.
Yeah. So red herring. He's a red herring ultimately, right? But they're still killing on holidays, so it seems as if the killer is Gilda, which to me it seemed like it was, but I guess it's ambiguous. But she's become a copycat killer on purpose just to get the scent off of her and to make Calendar Man her red herring, essentially.
Yeah, kind of. It gets complicated though, because since Calendar Man isn't Arkham, it's like, how much is the suspicion thrown off of her?
That's true. Like, so it was there the whole time.
Yeah, but
yeah.
Anyway, we'll go further into it. But the first one is Long Good Friday, of course, simply due to just that thematic element of the mobster who is subsequently taken down bit by bit over the course of a holiday. But it's not the only crime thriller. One of them that was influential on both The Long Halloween and its sequel, Dark Victory, is the movie The Untouchables. Kevin Costner, Sean Connery as federal agents trying to take down De Niro's Al Capone. Both the film and the comic feature the mobster's ledger as a plot point in taking them down, as we can see here. It was also influential on the sequel to The Long Halloween, Dark Victory. The title, I forgot to mention this, but the title, Dark Victory, also comes from a film noir called Dark Victory. However, I couldn't really find much thematic resonance in the same way as with The Long Good Friday. But I would say The Untouchables was an even bigger influence on Dark Victory. I'm not going to get too much into this because it's mainly The Long Halloween, but since we're here anyway, the big influence of The Untouchables on Dark Victory is that Loeb and Sale sort of recast Chief O'Hara from the 60s series into being Sean Connery from The Untouchables. Right down to the mustache, which the original O'Hara Stanford rep did not have. Not to mention that Sean Connery's character in The Untouchables was meant to be Irish, just like O'Hara. And then we have the similar images here in the YouTube version of both he and Gordon meeting on a bridge, with O'Hara being in the uniform and Kevin Costner's Elliot Ness being in sort of the hat and trench coat, just like Gordon classically is anyway. I was sort of half expecting Dark Victory for Batman to be like, I'm doing my best, O'Hara. And for O'Hara to respond, only losers do their best. Winners come home and fuck the prom queen. So, unfortunately, they just didn't put that part in. If you're going to take anything, at least put that part in. But I know that's from a different Connery movie.
Oh, man.
Also, both The Untouchables and Dark Victory have a select list of trusted cops gathered by the Irish cop and the main cop to take down the mobster. Speaking of mobster movies, though, we've also got the Scorsese film Goodfellas. In issue 2, there is a character named Willie Two Times who says everything twice, and this seems like a reference to the character Jimmy Two Times in Goodfellas, who also says everything twice. Again, very small thing on it, and we even get a Batman movie reference in here with the Joker. Joker quotes it's a similar moment as Mask of the Phantasm in both Mask of the Phantasm and The Long Halloween. The songs are used to introduce Joker's entrance before Joker says a line that I'll have Zach go ahead and say.
I hate that song.
So, yes.
Oh, man.
And further outside of that, I think the most apparent is the use of Calendar Man, as Andrew and I were previously talking about. Calendar Man is essentially Hannibal Lecter in this storyline. Batman consults Calendar Man to help get inside the head of Holiday since they both committed holiday-related crimes. This, of course, seems like a reference to the use of Hannibal Lecter in novels like Red Dragon and its more famous sequel, Silence of the Lambs, most famously adapted in the 91 movie with Sir Anthony Hopkins as Lecter. And I think the idea of a Rogues Gallery villain serving as Hannibal Lecter is a cool idea, but I will point out something that I think I realized upon research for this episode. Hannibal Lecter is pivotal in the capture of the serial killer in Silence of the Lambs. Calendar Man is the opposite. He is useless in this comic.
Yeah.
At most, he talks about the possibility that Holiday could be a man or a woman, but it seems like he doesn't actually know who the hell Holiday is. He just wants to make it seem like he does. And then he later suggests, you have something Holiday wants. He's going to target Boss Maroni. And that's about it. And even then, the Maroni thing is something Batman and Gordon could have figured out on their own.
Maroni was like, one of the last ones left, one of the only ones left, isn't it?
I'm so smart. I think it's going to be that one. He's the last monster alive.
So, Ben, you're saying they could take out Calendar Man entirely.
Yes.
And this would just be a totally fine comic.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think so. This aspect mainly gets known because people are just like, oh, it's cool. There's this Hannibal Lecter thing of it. But I feel like it doesn't really add anything to it. And most fans really don't give a shit about Calendar Man outside of this type of role in the Long Halloween.
Now that you say that, I think I was expecting him to do more considering his immediate, the presence you feel at first.
Yeah, because it is a cool idea. Don't get me wrong. But then if you take a look at the actual scenes, I'm just like, what is actually accomplished here outside of just the cool image of Batman outside the cell trying to get some information?
Right. Go ahead, John. Sorry about that.
Oh, yeah, no, I was just going to say, I mean, here's the Calendar Man. I always kind of felt like, I mean, this is just my gut reaction, because when Long Halloween first came out, I was thinking, oh, will this be a Calendar Man story? Because I was really young. I only knew about Calendar Man from the Batman role-playing game, like source book. Ooh. I didn't play it. I just collected it and had Calendar Man in it. And this is an interesting villain I've never heard of before. And, are they going to bring him in? And I sort of feel like he was brought in as an afterthought, like, oh, wait, there was already a holiday villain. But what can I make him do? Oh, I can bring him in as a consultant. And that's just, this is how it felt to me when I was reading when it came out. But Calendar Man here, by changing him into Lecter, it raises kind of further questions, especially because this is how he's been defined since then. He's appeared in the Arkham games like this. And I'm not sure why he's in Arkham or why he seems so dangerous. He's kind of being treated as, I mean, what has he actually done? People in the games have sort of made up that, he was a holiday murderer of his own, but I don't think the comic even mentioned any of his crimes.
I think they just said that he did holiday-related crimes, but Holiday does murder, and he doesn't. So it's like, and it's also, this is supposed to be at the earliest the Halloween of year 2. So it's kind of weird to be like, we got this sort of Silver Age silly villain already during this time who's now locked up in Arkham, but is treated like he's Hannibal Lecter. Like, there's no, like, Silence of the Lambs has that great lead up to just seeing Hopkins in there, and you already know he's bad news. You've got the whole thing about, like, this is what he did to the nurse and stuff, and leaves it up to your imagination. And here it's just like, he just did some holiday crimes. Let's see what he thinks. And he doesn't contribute anything.
Well, can't you assume it's some unspeakable murder, though? I mean, considering the situation, not that I like Calendar Man or I think he should be in the comic, but I just from my assumption is that he's basically a Hannibal Lecter type, right? He's not just done crimes; he's killed many people.
That's certainly how other writers have tried doing it since then, I think. But no one's really made it work. I don't recall any story.
They haven't unlocked the Calendar Man key, the lock, just yet, huh?
Yeah,
I would say so. Yeah, outside of this specific role in it.
I think this would have. Go ahead. I think this would have been a better story if it was like a retelling or a reintroduction to Calendar Man, and he would have been like the main kind of mystery villain, or if this was like the last Arkham, where he had like a hidden compartment or hidden like passageway to get out of Arkham, and he really was committing all the crimes. Then he would have been pivotal. He would have been like a pivotal part of the story. So I think that actually would have made more sense.
That would have actually bookended. I have opinions about Hush as well, but in Batman Hush, the whole
so do we.
Yes, opinions. The whole, it would mirror the whole take the character who's considered a Silver Age wash-up joke by at least some people, and have him be dangerous at the end. But that it would have worked in that regard, I suppose.
Yeah, and it also would have been because of the thematic idea of this is the birth of the Rogues Gallery finally taking over. Like, you don't have to just do the origin of Two-Face. Like, imagine if there were like different origins here and there of different characters from this story, and by the end they evolve. I'm not saying you do everybody's origin story. That's a little too crowded. But like, if Julian Day is like some mob accountant type person and he wants to like take them out and that type of stuff, and this is how he becomes Calendar Man, is through these holiday killings, it would have like fundamentally changed the character and brought him up into like the A-list. If they did this version. But oh well, didn't write it. So anyway, next,
it lends itself to detectives to a really good detective story too, trying to figure out. I mean, it's like the Riddler, right? It could lend itself to a good, detective noir thing. And it's just not pivotal to this detective noir story.
Right. Again, like, I love the idea of Batman in a like Will Graham or Clarice Starling role against a Hannibal Lecter Rogues Gallery villain sort of thing. I love that idea, but when I look at these actual scenes, I'm just like, there's nothing really happening here.
I would have loved to have seen Sale do the classic Calendar Man costume where he's in red and has a cape made of calendar pages. It's ridiculous and ostentatious. It's the kind of thing that Sale could, I mean, he did draw that Calendar Man for Shadow of the Bat shortly before, but his art style, you could actually see it evolving over the course of each of these Halloween specials. It would have been really cool to see try to contrast his dark, moody thing with this ridiculous, ostentatious, and yet I could see it maybe working in the context of the story, that kind of costume. But again, criticizing a story that didn't happen.
The next crime thriller I'll have. This was something that John actually introduced me to through the blog, because I had not seen this one. This is a lesser-known Harrison Ford crime thriller, because, outside of the Indiana Jones and Han Solo and Jack Ryan movies and Blade Runner, he was also doing a lot of really solid crime thrillers throughout the late 80s and the 90s and stuff. So Witness, The Fugitive, one of my favorites. But this one is Presumed Innocent, starring Harrison Ford with Bonnie Bedelia as his wife. Have you seen this one, Zach?
I have not. It looks familiar.
It's got it's Raul
Andrew,
Julia
heard
too.
Of this one?
I've heard of it. I've never seen it.
I didn't see it until I read John's blog pointing out the similarities between this one. Because I just heard of it, but I didn't really know what it was about on it. So let's go into it. So Harrison Ford plays a prosecutor like Harvey Dent, and his wife at home is played by Bonnie Bedelia, who's most famous as John McClane's wife in the first two Die Hards. But something interesting to note that's on John's About Faces is that Presumed Innocent is based off of a book with this cover, which has the Statue of Justice divided in two different colors.
Oh, man.
Like a certain Rogues Gallery villain. So that novel is by Scott Turow. And we're about to spoil the ever-loving fuck out of this movie because we kind of have to when it comes to the connections here. Both the film and the comic are murder
If you're worried
mysteries.
about Presumed Innocent, then find it on Amazon Prime right now and go watch
It's actually on HBO Max right now.
Take a break.
HBO Max, wow, great. Okay, there you go.
I'll start and then I'll let John go further into the details here since he introduced this to me. But both feature revelations towards the end set in the basement of the house where the audience finds out that the murderer was the prosecutor's wife. John, I'll let you go further into that because those are the main things. That's kind of the overarching thing.
I want to actually mention that this movie, I first heard about it through a sketch on Kids in the Hall, the great Canadian sketch troupe, where a character revealed how depraved and how evil he was by spoiling the ending to his friend.
Yeah.
And so that's all this movie was to me, and I decided to actually watch it for whatever reason. And the whole plot, as you say, he's a prosecutor, he's a successful man, he has a wife who's it's been a while since I've seen the whole thing. I remember she's stuck at home. She is dealing
she's unemployed, trying to find a job.
Yeah. And she's neglected, I think it's fair to say, by her husband, always at work. But then her husband has an affair with one of his staff members who ends up getting murdered. And so the whole movie is him being framed for the murder, with all suspicion coming on him, all of his dirty laundry being aired out, and he manages to be exonerated and is a free man, and it's seemingly a happy ending, but the murderer is never found. And then he goes down to his basement workshop. He has his home has a basement workshop that's very dimly lit and creepy, and he finds the bloody murder weapon, and he realizes, oh crap, it was my wife. She found out about the affair, and she killed her, and the wife sees that he sees, so she decides to sit him down and to deliver a detached monologue about, theoretically, a woman who found out that her husband was having an affair, and she, because this is a story written by a dude in the 80s, blames the girlfriend, not the husband. The husband's blameless. He was seduced by the demon, and so she kills the mistress and leaves just enough evidence to so her husband could realize it was her, and then they wouldn't have to. They never have to talk about their feelings. They never have to talk about their problems. Like a good WASP couple, they never have to talk about it. But then she doesn't intend for him to actually be accused of the murder, and she feels terrible about it and is ready to confess. But then at the last second, he's exonerated. So hooray! I don't have to confess. We can go back to our happy lives at the end. And that's how the movie ends, with Harrison Ford feeling guilt-ridden that he drove his wife to commit this murder and get away with it, and he's the only one who knows. And now they get to, live out the rest of their marriage, raising their kid with this horrible secret between them, and that's how it ends. And so when I saw that, I saw, of course, the spooky monologue and the scary workshop, and I remembered Long Halloween, because the workshop they have in the basement is a very particular plot point in Harvey and Gilda Dent's basement. They have a workshop in their basement, despite the fact that neither of them ever seem to be doing any home repairs. Like,
I'll get to it soon.
Yeah, I think the first time we see it, Harvey's down there with his shirt off, and I maybe he's just bored and spinning that little device handle, just like doop-a-doop-a-doo. What am I gonna do about the mop? Doop-a-doo.
Let me brood shirtless here.
Yeah.
Ladies. That's how I do.
Oh, and also, if he is doing work down, my girlfriend brought this up. It doesn't seem very safe to be working with equipment with your shirt off down there. He doesn't have safety glasses. He's just got his boobs out and everything. So anyway. Yeah, so
it's not like I'll ever be disfigured, right?
Yeah, it's fine. My skin will always be fine.
Oh man.
So yeah, when I saw Presumed Innocent, for whatever reason, I was just this has to be the ending that he was going for. But I've heard nobody make this connection. And it's one of those many things as I try to figure out my feelings about Long Halloween after all these years, I don't see anyone else talk about them. I feel like I'm taking crazy pills. So it is up to you, dear listeners, to discern how full of shit I am.
Is her name also Gilda in that movie, or what?
It's not. But I mean, Gilda does come from the original comic where Harvey Dent appeared.
Yeah,
so
I gotcha. Yeah.
They were just
had a long
carrying that
history.
over.
Yeah.
They were just carrying that aspect over. But if she wasn't named Gilda, who knows? Who knows if she had the same stuff? It could have also been Grace. Yeah.
So Ben, you agree with these findings from John?
I do.
Yeah.
Considering just the history that we've seen in terms of what's been taken, and then we have, I know John's on his blog you've pointed out other instances of like the Michael Mann movie Manhunter influencing and a Gambit comic that they did, and
a Wolverine
having
and
direct
Gambit.
lists from that Wolverine and Gambit, so that type of stuff. So it seems likely this is another influence here. So far it might seem like, okay, Long Halloween takes from a few crime thrillers, Makes sense, though. This is one of the most famous Batman detective stories. Of course, it's going to have some of the same tropes and influences here and there. Let's talk about the biggest one. A movie that probably takes the most from... It's a lesser-known movie called The Godfather.
Never heard of it.
I've heard of this one.
Let me stretch on this one.
Esoteric choice.
Yeah. So spoilers for The Godfather. If you haven't seen this in film school.
Oh man,
from Francis Ford Coppola and Mario Puzo. But
the guy that wrote Superman.
Yeah, the guy who wrote Superman.
He also wrote this one.
Yeah.
Oh man.
It's from that guy who also directed Bram Stoker's Dracula. In the 90s.
God damn.
Yeah. So let's go into some of the very apparent similarities here. The opening line, Godfather's is "I believe in America," whereas Bruce's is "I believe in Gotham City." Bruce and this other character, Bonacera, are similar in that they are people who have refused the friendship of a mobster, yet still arrive on that mobster's home on a wedding day to say this line. On a bigger note, though, if that wasn't already apparent, let's take a look at Carmine Falcone here.
Oh my god.
Kinda looks like Marlon Brando, just kind of.
Oh my god, dude.
Just a little.
So for the listeners who aren't seeing the visuals, we're looking at the first image of Falcone in Long Halloween with the image of Marlon Brando in The Godfather, with both gray-haired mobsters with mustaches in tuxedos with wedding rings on, smelling a rose. In the exact same
coincidence, dude. Just a coincidence, man.
Oh, yeah. No, Sale was not looking at this at all when this was happening.
Not at all.
This has forever solidified Falcone with the Brando character from The Godfather, Vito Corleone. Even though apparently that was not the original intention. John, you told me that when Falcone first appeared in Batman Year One, the actor they were thinking of was Lee Van Cleef.
Yeah, it was pointed out to me by a friend who very helpfully scanned me some script pages from the Absolute Edition. And according to Frank Miller, he intended Falcone. Oh, by the way, we're sticking with Falcone. I always prefer that, but the movie just did Falcone, and Nolan did Falcone.
Yeah,
I say Falcone.
Okay.
Yeah,
we're gonna go with we're gonna go with Falcone.
Yeah.
That Carmine, the Roman Falcone, was intended to look like Lee Van Cleef, the classic. The classic character actor who most famous was the bad, the bad, and the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah.
One of my favorite movies, which I can't get the title right, apparently. But instead, David Mazzucchelli did a different design that wasn't as explicitly. I mean, it's really the pose here that makes him look like Brando with the pose and all the lines that he says.
Oh, you mean with Sale here? Yeah.
And with Tim Sale in this art here.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think there was that. I don't know if Mazzucchelli was drawing on anyone in particular. He might have been, because Mazzucchelli also drew from celebrities for the basis of his artwork. So there might have been someone in mind. And this is who Tim Sale is building off of, which is the art of Mazzucchelli with Roman and with Harvey Dent from Batman Year One.
Mm-hmm.
And whoever Mazzucchelli meant for the Roman to be, Tim Sale really drove those Godfather Vito Corleone comparisons, along with presumably, and and who can blame him, because the script is pretty explicit that Loeb's script is explicitly just doing Godfather homages left and right. So this
is just the first 2 pages right now.
Yeah, we're in the first 2 pages.
Oh my god.
So that is pretty much one of the things where Falcone is now suddenly Marlon Brando from The Godfather, which was not originally apparent in Batman Year One, his first appearance as drawn by Mazzucchelli, as John was talking about. And these connections have followed ever since. The TV show Gotham has gone as far as to call him Don Falcone, just like there was Don Corleone in The Godfather. And then in the animated version of The Long Halloween, Falcone insists on being called Godfather, which is also weird to me, because the animated movie makes a specific effort to remove the Godfather references, but also makes him say, "You call me Godfather." So I'm like,
he actually looks even more like Vito Corleone in the movie than he does by Tim Sale. He looks like Vito if he got injected with Bane's venom, like a little bit, just a little bit of Bane's venom, and he can barely keep his tux on.
I've been doing some lifting.
I do lifts on this the day of my daughter's wedding.
Give me some of the creatine.
That guy doesn't have a bowl cut, though. It's not the same.
So, Falcone himself isn't the only Godfather homage. His family is too. His son, Alberto Falcone, who's supposedly Holiday, is seemingly a combination of Michael and Fredo Corleone. Alberto is considered the good son. He went to college. He stayed out of the family business, much like Michael at least started off as in, 50% of The Godfather Part 1. But Alberto's also considered too weak to take over, like Fredo Corleone. Funny enough, there's one quick tangent. When Jeph Loeb and Tim Sale shared their ideal cast in Wizard Magazine on who should play Alberto Falcone, their pick was John Turturro, the man who's playing Carmine Falcone in Matt Reeves' The Batman.
That's cool.
And it seems like maybe that's not a coincidence, considering the fact that Loeb was Matt Reeves' screenwriting teacher, so they knew each other probably around the time that this was put in Wizard. So
Very possible.
That's probably how that came about. Anyway, Falcone's other child in The Long Halloween, at least, is Sophia Falcone. Sophia seems to be like the other Corleone children as well, her being tough and angry enforcer like Sonny, while also being the only daughter like Connie. And her name, Sophia, may also be a reference to Sofia Coppola, who infamously played Michael's daughter in The Godfather Part 3 before becoming a renowned director herself. So those are some of the connections on the characters. Maybe some of those characters are similar. That can't be that bad. Well, all right, let's take a look at the plot here. Both The Godfather and The Long Halloween take place on the day of a wedding. In The Godfather, it's the day of his daughter's wedding, while in The Long Halloween, it's the night of his nephew's wedding.
See, that's different.
Both feature the main mobster watching the wedding through the blinds of his office.
Oh my god, dude.
Godfather has the FBI arrive at the wedding to jot down license plate numbers, while The Long Halloween has Harvey Dent arrive to jot down license plate numbers, which, when you really think about it, is a weird way to introduce the district attorney on this. You would think a cop would be doing that, or Gordon would be doing that, but I'm just like, why is Dent doing this? Both weddings have the image of a blonde woman with a cigarette asking about another wedding guest. In Godfather, it's Kay asking about Luca Brasi, and in Long Halloween, it's Carla Vitti asking about Bruce Wayne. Yeah, that's true. That's true. Pacino does not have a bowl cut in The Godfather. It would have been better with it. No, it wouldn't have.
Oh,
Both have a very similar family wedding picture being taken at the same time. After the wedding, Batman and Catwoman have a fight in Falcone's penthouse, where Falcone says the line, "In my own home, where my children sleep," which is a paraphrase of the line from The Godfather Part 2, "In my home, in my bedroom, where my wife sleeps." Both Falcone family and the Corleone family, of course, talk quote-unquote business as a euphemism for mob activity, which is so standard at this point, it feels less of a specific Godfather reference, But I have to point it out anyway. Both have similar images of a couple walking outside of a movie theater together. This next one is where things start getting very weird, because the first victim of The Long Halloween is Johnny Vitti, who dies in a bathtub filled with blood, similar to Frank Pentangeli in The Godfather Part 2, who also dies in the bathtub. Both characters had tried to turn witness against their bosses in the past, and, karma comes and catches up to them. It was our research assistant, Dan, who actually pointed this one out to me, and at first I was just like, yeah, they both die in a bathtub, but it's a different type of death, until I took another look at the images here. In The Godfather Part 2, Frank Pentangeli slits his wrists in the bathtub and dies, which is why it makes sense that he's bleeding from the wrist. In The Long Halloween, Johnny Vitti is supposed to be shot in the head. So why is he bleeding from the wrist in this art here and has no wounds in his head whatsoever? Also,
and no
both
blood.
men have no blood from the head at all.
Yeah.
And both men are basically facing this, their heads are drooped on the same exact side in both of these. So
It looks like the famous painting.
Marat?
It's kind of like yeah, there you go, the death of Marat.
Yeah.
It does look like that. Like the Godfather framing of that scene right there. Not the one in The Long Halloween, but that definitely reminds me of that painting.
I bet that was intentional. I
think so, yeah.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Coppola
Francis
being
Ford
all
Coppola.
arty.
So was this a miscommunication between artist and script writer?
It could be, because there's literally, right after this is the panel of Harvey Dent saying 2 shots to the head. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. I'm just like, where's the gunshot?
Yeah.
So it could be that too.
So he was maybe given this movie and said, "Hey, draw these scenes, including this one," and then so he draws it, and then they write the script. They change the actual Long Halloween script to gunshots.
Maybe. I mean, he is still shot though. He's supposed to be shot. So even if he wasn't shot in the head, why is he bleeding from the wrist?
I'd be curious to read the script. I don't know if that's ever been published anywhere. I mean, I'm kind of kicking myself for not looking it up beforehand to see.
Gilda was so good at shooting that she shot the bullet and it grazed his wrist, which split the wrist, and then he just bled out.
And the 2 shots to the head. I got nothing. I got nothing funny or witty. I can't figure it out.
Okay.
She runs fast as shit too, by the way. I noticed that watching the movies. I mean, I was able to tell more. She's like a fucking Olympic runner.
Oh yeah. As Holiday, I forgot about that. Yeah,
she's supposed to be. Yeah.
She also looks very manly in one shot.
Yeah.
When her face is covered up. Okay, so let's keep going. In The Godfather, one character sees a bunch of money and says, "If this were someone else's wedding." Well, in The Long Halloween, Harvey Dent sees Falcone's money and says, "If we were 2 other guys." The Godfather features a character showing Michael a famous recipe for how to make pasta sauce, which Carmine Falcone does for his son in issue 2. In both cases, they talk about the sausages and adding those in there. Issue 4, Falcone's sister says, "Just like Papa, you keep your friends close, but your enemies closer," which is, again, a direct lift from, because that's the famous line from Godfather 2. Both movies also feature the death of one of the mobster's sons, Sonny in The Godfather and Alberto in The Long Halloween, though Alberto's death is a fake-out in the comic. Not so much of a fake-out in the movie where he gets chopped up to death in the propeller of the boat. I was like, oh, he
threw me for a loop watching that. I was like,
he ain't coming back. He ain't Holiday.
Wait, is this another fake-out? Oh, nope. They are really making it clear that it is not.
Yep.
Okay.
I had to get shot first. Then, when I got close to the fans, I unloaded this huge bag of body parts so that everyone would think it was me.
Some chum in the water.
In The Godfather, the rival to the Corleone family, Salozzo, says to a corrupt official on his payroll, "Try the veal, it's the best in the city." In The Long Halloween, Boss Maroni, the rival to the Falcone family, says to a corrupt government official on his payroll, "Have the veal, it's the best in the city." So basically the same exact moment.
Oh, man.
In The Godfather, they use these images that I'm pulling up here in the YouTube version of a dead mobster by a fence. This is actually the photo of real-life mobster Frank Nitty's body after he committed suicide. They used this image in The Godfather during this whole montage about gang wars. And now it's sort of slipped into The Long Halloween in issue 6, where Gordon's looking over a photo of murderers. Supposedly holiday murders, but we hadn't seen this image before. So it's again, purely just because it was part of The Godfather. Both Godfather and The Long Halloween have characters practicing handguns inside of a tool workshop. But our research assistant Dan also brought up this image of Bonacera being seen through an elevator with the image of Bruce in a similar designed elevator door. This one might be a little loose, but considering all the other references, who knows?
Mm-hmm.
No, that's definite lift.
Yeah. In Godfather, Vito has the famous line, "Look how they massacred my boy," after his son is shot. In The Long Halloween, Falcone's father says, "Look at what they've done to my boy," when young Falcone is shot. Luigi Moroni says, "You can act like a man," which is exactly what Vito says to Johnny Fontaine in The Godfather. Both comic and the Godfather movie have a father-son duo talking about business in a garden, and it is in that same garden where the older mobster, the father, ends up dying. In issue 11, Carmine, this one is almost ridiculous. When it's direct lines, I'm just like, come on, really? Carmine says, "You're my sister and I love you, but never ask me to explain," which is an echo of Michael's famous line, "You're my brother and I love you, but never take sides against the family again."
He doesn't even have a mouth in that picture. How's he even saying that? His mustache said it.
Falcone's power is he talks through his mustache.
Superpower, dude.
And finally, Two-Face gets his revenge, saying, "You have to answer for Harvey Dent," which is a paraphrase of Michael's line, "You have to answer for Santino," when he wants revenge at the end of The Godfather. Mind you, this is all just The Long Halloween. I did not go into the references of The Godfather and Dark Victory, but there's plenty more here, right down to a replication of the Alberto Falcone wakes up with blood in his sheets because there's a body in there. So that type of stuff.
I'll be damned.
So this begs the question, is there too much Godfather in The Long Halloween? What do you guys think?
John.
Who's going first?
Okay.
Good, John.
Single me out. Okay. This is a really complex question because there are so many issues to discuss when it comes to doing homages or stealing or ripping off or any of this stuff. It's a super complicated question when it comes to movies that do this. Like Quentin Tarantino comes to mind. A lot of people I've noticed, a lot of people hate Tarantino for a number of reasons. Well, one reason some people will bring up that they hate Tarantino is that they just hate how he takes stuff from these movies, usually obscure movies, and like makes them his own to the point that he almost takes credit for it. Like people will think of the movie itself rather than we'll think about his movie rather than the thing he was doing. Even though I firmly believe he was taking those with love and basically with the enthusiasm of someone saying, "Hey, if you like this, go see this original movie that I saw on a crappy VHS way back in the day. It's awesome." There's a complicated question just on that alone. And then in Batman and superheroes, Batman and like so many of the superheroes that came up from the Golden Age are also built up from being derivative from various other things, like usually the pulps and movies. So there's another complex question to be had there. So you're combining two of these complex questions and then throwing them into this with a movie that primarily, with Godfather alone, it's so well known and so iconic that I can truly see a lot of people not caring that they're lifting all these familiar scenes to reflect with the Godfather or recreate the Godfather, like Godfather fan fiction with Batman almost.
Which is kind of cool.
Yeah, you know? I can. These are not obscure references for most people. I mean, there are a bunch of here that I didn't even remember. So he really he really went all in on the references. But by and large, I don't think most people who read this would not have gotten the Godfather thing. Although this book has continued its reputation as being really popular, and I don't know how much the Godfather has necessarily carried over with the next generations of movie viewers. I was a teenage movie nerd who wanted to find everything that got referenced and things, so I would seek those out. But I truly don't know how many people would be getting into Batman, would get the Long Halloween recommendation, and would necessarily get the Godfather stuff. But they might, because of all the secondhand references it still has. They might not. I don't know.
I certainly didn't.
See? There we go, dude.
Yeah.
There we go. So I truly am... I've always been intimidated with trying to tackle the question. Personally, I found it to be lazy and cheap. I thought it was a cheap, cynical shorthand to try to cash in on the nostalgia and the prestige of Godfather, to infuse a sense of importance and artistry and magnitude in Batman. It was kind of the dramatic equivalent of those terrible parody movies, the scary movie, not so much scary movie, but like disaster movie, where it's like, hey, let's point out this thing there. Remember that thing? You laughed at that thing. Why aren't you laughing now? It kind of felt that way to me, and still does.
With prestige, yeah.
But then it gets more complicated with Presumed Innocent, and to a lesser extent, Long Good Friday, but really the Presumed Innocent thing, which they built the backbone of the entire twist of this story. Loeb did, on this movie and a novel too, the novel Presumed Innocent by Scott Turow, that were bestsellers, big hits in their day, but which have had zero cultural footprint, unlike The Godfather. They were hugely popular and then vanished, like so many things do. And the fact that people don't know that, and Loeb gets credit for that, or that the people don't see what he's doing there, it doesn't feel as fair as him using Godfather, which I already don't particularly care for, but at least there's a sense of audience involvement with knowing I see what he's doing here, and I'm in on the joke, I'm in on the reference. But doing that with Presumed Innocent, it feels lopsided and it bothers me more. Especially considering that, as you've started talking about, the mystery of Gilda and the revelation of Gilda has lots of flaws to dig in. A lot of ambiguity that may or may not be purposeful, that a lot of people may like because of it. But I feel like seeing it on its own without keeping in mind the Presumed Innocent connection is, I feel like people should who really want to think about this should see the movie and keep that in mind and compare it as well. So, yeah, it's a very complex question for me because it's very subjective, which is,
of course, yeah,
it's so subjective. I cannot give a definite snobby, this is bad and this is why. I can just say my problems with it, why it doesn't work for me, and you can decide from there. So that's basically all I got.
Well, let's see what everyone else thinks. Let's go with Zach. Because, Zach, you said that you didn't catch a lot of the Godfather references until we brought them up.
No, really none at all. I guess I've only seen the first Godfather movie. I haven't seen any of the sequels, and I've only seen it once. And I don't know. I know it's a very important film for, history, but it's just nothing that left a lasting impact on me other than a couple references. So I really
screaming in the comments now.
They can scream all they want because
you probably hate Citizen Kane too.
Oh no, I do remember Citizen Kane from my film class as well. I don't know. I just I never picked up on a lot of that stuff, and it's amazing now for us to go through the slideshow and to see those visuals compared side by side, and it's it has opened my eyes to how incredibly derivative this is. And I'll be honest, like the actual mob parts of The Long Halloween, they're not really my favorite. The first time I read this, and I'll admit, like, I am a fan of the book, and I was a fan of Tim Sale's artwork for a very long time. I was just really into the bad guys. I like the idea of the rise of the freaks and weirdos in Gotham City, and the downfall of the organized crime rings. And that's what really, kind of drew me in. I was always super excited to see, like, Joker pulling some shit in the book and killing these, like, mobsters and while they're eating, Italian food. And I just thought that was kind of cool. That was what drew me in. I really didn't care that much about, like, a lot of the stuff going on with Falcone. But, yeah, I will agree now that it is extremely derivative, and I guess maybe they are kind of banking on people like me that at the time that this came out, probably like adolescent boys, they probably were like, well, maybe they haven't seen The Godfather, so we can get away with this. It doesn't seem to be done with love as much, like you were talking about, John, with Tarantino. And I know a lot of people argued about Joker being derivative. Todd Phillips, like drawing inspiration from the two Scorsese films, but I don't know, this one, I guess now that I'm seeing it side by side, it's either very derivative or maybe Tim Sale has a soft spot for The Godfather, but I don't know. It just especially that one of Don Corleone, like sniffing that rose on his shirt. I'm like, wow, that is a direct lift. Is it supposed to be an homage to it? So I don't know. It's just
and it's the most
very
famous
derivative
image of Falcone in the comics.
Yeah,
the most famous image of Falcone in the comics is Vito Corleone.
Yeah, it's very derivative.
So Zach, you basically, if I would you say it's fair that the Godfather, all the Godfather stuff, the mob stuff, at least just it provides a skeleton, a structure for the other elements like the rogues to flesh it out and go wild around. So it's a structure. It's a structure that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
That's it. That's it. I was just in it for the bad guys. I guess other people read it and were like into the whole, like, all the mob stuff and the mysterious killings and everything, and I like that too. But I really like the rise of the freaks. I thought that was such a cool idea, because to me that's what I am interested in as far as Batman goes.
Of course, yeah.
Totally.
People aren't exactly going out to buy comics because they're like, "Oh, Falcone's in it. I have to."
Oh
see it.
yeah.
But let's go, Andrew. How much Godfather is too much Godfather when it comes to Long Halloween? What did you think of this?
I believe it was Picasso himself who said, "Creativity is hiding your sources," and I don't think they hid them well enough.
Definitely not.
In this.
Emphasis on hiding.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, it's tough. Like Zach, you're an artist, and it's like, go draw something completely original right now, please. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Go give that mandate to anybody, or to.
It takes a lot of research ahead of time so you are not ripping off somebody else.
Yeah, to an author or like a screenwriter like Ben. Go make something completely original right now. And I'm talking no influence whatsoever. Do it, please. Thank you. It's kind of impossible, right? You're going to have your influences, but yeah, like Picasso, you have to kind of hide it enough. And it's just like The Godfather is just, it's tough because these guys probably love the fuck out of Godfather. There probably is real love there. So I can see that, and they were like, what if Batman was like in The Godfather, bro? That's really what this was pitched as. And what if Hannibal Lecter was in there? That'd be fucking sweet, bro. Fucking best comic ever.
How it came about, yeah.
Yeah. So, I can't fault him too much. I haven't written anything like this, but it's like, yeah, it's probably a bit too much. Try to hide it just a little better,
Yeah.
So
I think there are certain things that are a little bit unavoidable if you're dealing with mob stuff, because The Godfather is so seeped into pop culture that there's stuff about the mob you don't even realize comes from that. Certain lines keep your friends close but your enemies closer, that's become such a cliche, people have forgotten that comes from Mario Puzo.
That comes from fucking Godfather?
It does, exactly.
See, I have fucking no idea. My dad always said that, and I thought that was just something handed down through the generations, It's from fucking Godfather.
It's stuff like that that's how it's so seeped into pop culture, we forget the actual source. In real life, the real source of that was Mario Puzo's mom.
What? Really?
Is what I found. Yeah, Mario Puzo's mom said that, and then that made it into Godfather Part 2, and then it just seeped into pop culture from there.
Just some badass shit Italian Americans say to each other.
Yeah, exactly. Apparently a lot of the iconic lines from Godfather came from Puzo's mom.
Wow.
So a little bit of a Godfather trivia.
Making a canolo, not a cannoli. Canolo.
I think... So there's certain things that are a little bit unavoidable, them talking about business as a euphemism. I'm just that's so seeped in and it makes so much sense. It's kind of hard to avoid that. Stuff about Alberto being the good son and how that makes it a little better when there's a twist that he's actually the killer. Falcone and Moroni being rivals, that type of stuff. I'm you can't really avoid that. But then it's also did you have to start with the same exact wedding? Did you have to have the same lines? It almost feels like Falcone and Moroni are huge Godfather fanboys. They grew up on these movies and are trying to live it out themselves.
Right.
They forget the part where it all ends in tragedy and death. But it's
that's me. That's
it's
us.
So cool. Yeah, I'm gonna grow up my mustache just like Marlon Brando.
Here's a rose, bro.
Ben, you reminded me.
This.
You reminded me of something. In another one of those Batman role-playing books from the 80s, the role-playing games, there was a mobster who was described as, his name was Falcone. I don't know if this was before year one, so he wasn't, I think it was just a coincidence. I don't think Miller was lifting. He might have been from the role-playing game. But if I recall correctly, I'm pretty sure he was explicitly described as being a wannabe Vito Corleone who loved the movie and wanted to recreate it.
That's awesome.
I'm pretty sure he was in one of those. That was in one of the modules of the role playing game. So what you just said, it tracks with role playing game canon as much as that's worth anything.
Jeph Loeb's going to come on there and be like, "You see, that's what I was going for the whole time."
John,
that's all from that role playing game. If you guys just played that game, you would know this.
And John, this game played pretty much just like Dungeons and Dragons, just with Batman characters.
I think so. It was they had a whole DC Universe role playing game with a base set and lots of individual modules for different characters and different cities and worlds. And I love the one I never played them because I had no friends. But
no. Sorry, I asked, man.
No, it's fine. I actually I'm a nerd who likes reading all like who's and profiles, and I like looking at fictional maps. So they were really interesting, and they had all these character bios in these that had all this information that was a great source, even if I wasn't going to actually use the playthings. So yeah, they were from the 80s, and they did a couple times, and then they stopped doing them by the 90s, more or less.
All right, cool.
Jeez,
that's awesome.
Yeah, but I did not know about that one, so I'll have to look into that. But yeah, I mean, the animated movie seems to make a lot of efforts to take out these Godfather references, with the exception of Falcone just flat out wanting people to call him Godfather. I'm like, okay, that's basically 2 steps back after you took 1 step forward. Right. But you guys, I know Andrew saw this movie recently. I know, John, you've been gradually making your way through it. But you can see that most of the stuff that we brought up from the comic, it was cut from the movie. They make a deliberate effort in doing that, and it just goes to show you don't really lose anything once you take that stuff out. Do we really need Carla Vitti saying the same exact line? Do we really need these direct lifts and that type of stuff on that? So I get that it's kind of a fun thing, but like at least do like the Sopranos thing, where they are just like, as it says in The Godfather, like have the actual characters reference the movie and that type of stuff. If you're going to do those lines. So that's my stance on it. It was just like there's certain elements where I'm like, okay, that's fine, but the other ones where I'm just like, this is starting to feel like too much of a parody. So last thing to note before the break is we actually did get a couple Godfather actors as part of the Batman franchise. Abe Vigoda, who played Sal Tessio, was the voice of Sal Valestra in Mask of the Phantasm, and Falcone himself got to be played by one of the actors from The Godfather, Alex Rocco, who was Mo Green, the guy who gets shot in the eye towards the end. So he was the voice of Falcone in the Batman Year One animated movie. So this kind of sort of ends up being the snake that eats itself in a way. We got Godfather influencing Falcone, and then Falcone being played by somebody who is from these movies. So that's kind of fun. But
that's my favorite part from Mask of the Phantasm. Sal Valestra, whenever Joker brings him into the the World of Tomorrow, or House of the Future, all that stuff. Yeah.
Robot wife.
Yeah, that too.
Oh yeah,
Meatloaf again. So that's how much The Long Halloween takes from movies. How much does it take from other comics? Find out soon after the break.
Here at Chat of the Wild, our Game Club podcast, we have been using our lens of truth to do deep dives on the Legend of Zelda series, in order, covering 1 to 2 dungeons each episode. Our show also looks at Zelda-likes, such as Crusader of Senti, Golden Axe Warrior, and the bizarre journey of For the Frog, The Bell Tolls. Join us right now as we play Ari and the Secret of Seasons, our first new release since Season 1, or check out our past seasons breaking down nearly 20 action-adventure titles. New episodes drop every Wednesday, here on the Greenlit Podcast Network.
Lord have mercy, y'all. Do you like hounds? Do you enjoy pooches? Do you find yourself enjoying time spent with that of canines? Talking about dogs, y'all.
As you might have heard, Superhero Stuff You Should Know has now teamed up with Barkbox. For every month, you get a box for your special canine.
Pooches.
Or hounds.
That's right. 1 free extra month if you go to barkbox.com/superherostuffpod.
Follow the link and you'll get a free extra month valued at $35 and valid for all multi-length plans.
So get the Barkbox for your hound, for your pooch, for your canine.
Your doggo will thank you. And we're back, and we're going to dive into the comics that predated The Long Halloween in terms of influences. We have kind of a major one, and then kind of a not-so-major one, unfortunately, an underrated one. But first we'll go into the major one, which is, of course, The Dark Knight Returns. Now, one of the most famous lines in The Long Halloween is, "I believe in Harvey Dent," which made its way into The Dark Knight as Harvey Dent's campaign slogan. However, this line may have actually originated in The Dark Knight Returns, where Bruce says, quote, "We must believe in Harvey Dent," when it comes to Harvey's rehabilitation earlier in the comic. On top of that, The Long Halloween sometimes gets credit for the idea that Batman's presence attracts the Rogues Gallery criminals to dress up and be as theatrical as him. However, this does technically originate from The Dark Knight Returns as well, with Dr. Wolper talking about this on TV. Though you could say The Long Halloween dramatizes this to be, in real time, as opposed to Wolper talking about an already established Batman. Mm-hmm. So that could be it. But let's go into something that it gets a lot of credit for, which is its origin of Two-Face. So Long Halloween gets credit from David Goyer in the opening of Absolute Long Halloween, saying, quote, that scene on the rooftop between Gordon, Dent, and Batman in Long Halloween, in which you realize Batman can obviously bring criminals to justice, but he needs the police to arrest them and the DA's office to prosecute them. That was something new that Jeph Loeb introduced into the lore. Not quite, actually. Thing is, Goyer's wrong.
John
here.
is visually upset.
I know. I took this screen cap from his blog because I wanted to use it, because this is a common misconception. This is not just David Goyer. I can't even completely blame David Goyer, because this comic was extremely popular around the time already, before The Dark Knight even came out. So many fans were just like, they just got to adapt Long Halloween.
At least he's not talking about She-Hulk right here. Then we're good.
Yeah, so thankfully he's not. Thankfully he's just talking about this. But not only did the scene on the rooftop not originate from Jeph Loeb in The Long Halloween, but neither did the partnership of Batman and Harvey Dent and Gordon working together. That didn't originate from Long Halloween. The biggest comic I think most Long Halloween fans have not read, but should, is Batman Annual number 14.
Yeah.
This is mentioned by John in our last episode with him. It is a storyline called The Eye of the Beholder, written by Andrew Helfer, pencils by Chris Sprouse, inks by Steve Mitchell, letters by John Costanza, colors by Adrian Roy, with this cover by Neil Adams, which is a pretty awesome cover.
That's the one really I've got sweet. Signed in here right now.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So this is from 1990. The Long Halloween is published in 96. So just to repeat, this comic, 90, Long Halloween, 96. This predates it about 6 years. So what are the similarities then? Other than the fact that one, they both tell the origin of Two-Face. Let's start with how both feature a serial killer with a gimmick, whose crimes lead Harvey further and further into his descent. Both the comic and The Long Halloween feature full page of silent panels of the killer at work, as we see here. In Eye of the Beholder, however, it's not a holiday killer, but a serial killer targeting senior citizens. But an even bigger similarity is that in this comic, it's shown that Batman, Gordon, and Harvey meet on a rooftop. In both scenes, Harvey and Gordon are talking about their marriages and their families before Batman arrives. This is a specific beat lifted into The Long Halloween. When Batman arrives, the trio make a partnership to take down basically crime and the mob. Again, directly lifted into The Long Halloween, but many people credit The Long Halloween for this image. It did not originate from Long Halloween. It came from Batman Annual number 14, as well as the newspaper strip we went over last time.
Yes.
John. By Bill Messner-Loeb's.
And you're right.
Go ahead.
You were absolutely right. This was the first one. It just narrowly beat out Eye of the Beholder.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, full credit to you for pointing that out. It was at least technically the predecessor, but yes.
Okay. So Bill Messner-Loeb is the first writer to have this rooftop.
Probably, I think he was. Although this, at least Eye of the Beholder got reprinted once in '95 in a collection to tie in with Batman Forever.
That's how I read it. Yeah.
So, me too. Totally. I love that book.
Yep.
So that it is as forgotten as Eye of the Beholder is. It's not the most forgotten and not necessarily the first to do this.
Yeah. So the newspaper strip by Bill Messner-Loeb, Carmine Infantino, and John Nyberg also has the trio meeting at the GCPD rooftop for the first time, as John found out when checking it out. But both this and Eye of the Beholder came out in the same year in 1990. So if you want to learn more about that newspaper strip, if you're new to the show, check out that episode if you haven't already, called The Original Batman 89 Sequel Comic. In the newspaper strip scene, Batman disappears at the end of the meeting, just like with, most sequences where he's talking to Gordon, but here it's with two other people. And so Dent makes a comment in the newspaper strip that he hates when he does that. In Eye of the Beholder, in a different scene, Batman disappears and a character says he's gone, and Gordon says he does that. A sort of shorter version of that. This exchange in The Long Halloween is Dent saying gone and Gordon saying he does that. The exact same line, which then gets carried over into The Dark Knight, as said by Gary Oldman, probably because it's in The Long Halloween.
Mm-hmm.
Next, the Eye of the Beholder was the one to introduce the idea that the two-headed coin came from Harvey's father, who used it to abuse him with a sick and twisted game where he would flip the coin, and if Harvey was correct or if it was tails, then he would be spared. But since it was a two-headed coin, Harvey never got the chance. Pretty fucked up. Long Halloween not only references this, but has a very similar scene of Harvey saying, "I visited my father, I got the coin from him," and Gilda being like, "Oh my god, that's terrible." So it's pretty much the same beat. Eye of the Beholder also predates Long Halloween in the Dents having trouble conceiving a child, and that being a big thing between Harvey and Gilda. Also predates it in having Harvey Dent making blatant verbal remarks about breaking the law just to take down criminals. Also predates with the idea that Harvey commits murder before he gets the acid in the face as Two-Face. It becomes pretty apparent once we get to this next part that Jeph Loeb has read this comic, because he flat out uses the same character, Fields. So, Fields is not in the animated movie, but fans might remember in the Long Halloween there's a character named Vernon Fields, who is Harvey's assistant and is secretly working for Boss Maroney. Yep. He's blonde, wears glasses, a bow tie, and overalls, but Vernon is basically the same character as the Eye of the Beholder character, Adrian Fields, Harvey's assistant, who's also secretly working for Boss Maroney and is blonde, wears glasses, a bow tie, and overalls. Why his name is changed from Adrian to Vernon, I don't know. It just seems a lot more on the nose, obviously corrupt. For
hiding his sources. See? Name change.
They'll never get me now.
I can't remember. Ben, are they both? I know that the one in the Long Halloween is responsible for the acid, smuggling it to Maroney. Is that the way it is in Eye of the Beholder?
It's not explicitly seen in Eye of the Beholder, but I think it's implied.
Okay.
Yeah, Maroney says that I want to give me a gun. I want to shoot him in the courtroom. And he's like, you can't get it. And Fields says, you can't get a gun in the courtroom, the metal detectors. He's like, oh, right. Yeah, didn't think of that. Well, give me something else then. Something that'll leave an impression. So, it's implied that Fields was the one who did that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, Fields is a major character in the comic, not in the animated movie, which is interesting. But again, it just seems like the movie's trying to hide Loeb's sources, more so than Loeb was. And then the Long Halloween also changed Boss Maroney's name as well. So in the original comic, here's the comic as well of Fields working with Maroney, and they both have scenes meeting with Maroney in a restaurant as this is all happening. Anyways, in the Eye of the Beholder, Maroney's first name is named Vincent Maroney. However, the Long Halloween changed it to Salvatore Maroney, and that's ever since he's been Sal Maroney in The Dark Knight and Gotham and stuff. But originally it was Vincent Maroney, and Loeb knows that because in issue 11, Harvey Dent says his full name is Salvatore Vincent Maroney. So clearly he's read this comic. Long Halloween also has this part with Batman having a disguise in the courtroom that looks very similar.
I like it better in Batman Forever when he's just
in the
sitting in the big rubber costume, like in the pews, just ready to jump up.
Golden Age style.
Yeah, exactly. That's Golden Age style.
What did they call Maroney in Batman Forever? Was it just Boss Maroney?
He's just Boss Maroney, yeah.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. I think Eye of the Beholder was the first time he ever got a first name, too.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
He was just Boss Maroney, and sometimes it was originally spelled Moroni. And then some writers would change, and it would go,
not good.
Moroni. And then it would go back and forth with Moroni, and now because of the Long Halloween, he is now definitively Salvatore Maroney.
Yeah. So that's our little deep dive into Boss Maroney.
He's been around almost 80 years. He deserves some credit, apparently, maybe.
It's also weird to me, side tangent, but it's weird to me that the live action adaptations of Boss Maroney have not really had him play a direct role at all in Harvey Dent's origin outside of Batman Forever.
It's like they're subverting expectations.
They've subverted it so much, though, that it's just like...
Yeah.
By the time you get to if somebody does the actual courtroom trials, the classic origin, you're just like, oh, like I think most people would wonder why they chose that as opposed to a warehouse explosion.
Yeah,
or probably
yeah.
chemical plant. There's so many different ways that they've turned him into Two-Face that like the courtroom origin is they're like subverting expectations that haven't really been set anymore.
Yeah, no one remembers the classic one. Even the comics got rid of the courtroom thing and changed it with the New 52. So it's such
yeah, that's true.
The most innovative thing they could do is adapt it faithfully.
Again, it's an underrated aspect of Batman Forever. It does bring to life the Golden Age origin for 3 seconds, but still, it does do that.
Tommy Lee Jones holding up that manila folder.
That file. Yeah.
Yep, that gets him right on that line there.
Exactly.
Everyone's saying release the Schumacher cut. I want the cut of the actual news footage in pristine HD of the Maroni trial. Give me that raw footage. The people, by which I mean me, demand it.
Give me Dennis Palladino as Boss Maroni. Anyway, back to what we have here. As we were laughing about earlier, we have the same exact disguise of Batman in the courtroom from Eye of the Beholder. He's in a beanie. He's in glasses. He's got a fake beard and mustache. He's got a jacket with the collars pulled up.
Looks like a laid-off lumberjack.
He's a laid-off lumberjack as his disguise. This is pre-Matches Malone. He's like, I'll be laid-off lumberjack in the courtroom. Nobody will know it's me.
No one will know. I'm a master of disguise.
In both versions, Maroni uses the excuse that he needs medicine for his ulcers in order to sneak in the acid before he throws it into Harvey's face. And then after attacking Dent, Maroni is shot. He's shown getting shot in Eye of the Beholder, but he's not actually shown getting shot in The Long Halloween until 2 issues later, or 1 or 2 issues later, where he says he got shot, but they never actually showed that. I wonder if Loeb just forgot he never actually had that in the original issue, or was just going off of Eye of the Beholder. But it seemed weird to me that in the comic, we literally go from Maroni being grabbed and just yelling, which doesn't really give cause to shoot him, to then later on saying that he got shot 3 times in the courtroom. So I'm like, I don't know. By the way, Eye of the Beholder, he gets shot 3 times.
But he survived because he's so badass and then immediately dies like the next panel in the story. Which makes it... Why did you bother?
He needs to survive so that Calendar Man can actually do something. That's right. Say that Maroni has a role and then get shot by Alberto. So you think Alberto's Holiday when he's not really Holiday, or maybe he is. Anyway.
Calendar Man.
Both comics feature close-ups of Harvey covering his face from the acid and his damaged eye peering out, which was way too hardcore to show in the 1940s when he first got the acid to his face. In both comics, Harvey goes to the hospital but escapes, which is not something that happened in the original origin. In the original, I think he just went home. He didn't end up escaping on that. He decided to be Two-Face later after he returned home.
Yeah. It was have a nice life, Harvey.
Your face is fucked, but
we'll send you your bill.
Looks like your insurance does not cover it.
Oh,
welcome to America.
And he went to crime.
Two-Face is born because of that.
This is back in the 40s. He probably just had to pay him a quarter and he'd be fine.
That's true.
He'd cover all his medical bills.
It looks like I do not have a quarter, though.
I have a silver dollar, but
you're going to have to wash the dishes before you leave to pay off your debt.
And then in both comics, Two-Face then goes off and finds Fields and in revenge for betraying him, ends up shooting him. And then ends up turning himself in at the end. So, pretty close. With all this evidence, I think it's fair to say the Long Halloween retells Eye of the Beholder. And yet, Eye of the Beholder is never credited as being the original. Everyone thinks The Long Halloween is a retelling of the original Two-Face origin when it comes to that stuff, but nobody really acknowledges that part. It's not seen as revamping Two-Face's origin the same way that Frank Miller revamped Batman's first year in Batman Year One.
Mm-hmm.
It's not even acknowledged in a special thanks section anywhere as being the basis for Loeb and Seal to continue off of, which... it's like, sure, DC owns it, so you don't necessarily have to thank the original writers, but it'd be nice, especially if you have some of the same exact images that come from that specific comic, like the Batman disguise or Fields. Here's another thing, though. I wonder if the Nolans actually read Eye of the Beholder, because it has a very similar scene of Gordon leaving his wife and infant baby in a high chair in order to talk to Batman outside of his house. So, I don't know. Yeah. Maybe that's a coincidence. But yeah, it does seem to draw off a lot of this comic. What do you guys think? I'll start with John. I know that we're in for a whole earful on this, but
I'll try to keep it shorter and less rambling than my last one. Look, Eye of the Beholder. Ever since I read it in that collection, that Batman Forever tie-in collection they did with the Two-Face and Riddler stories, I fell in love with it. It felt like my experience with the character. I was always interested in the character, and I loved the animated series. I loved the psychological take in the animated series, and this felt like that, but so much more weighty with the abusive father, and not just the abusive father, but the alcoholism, the psychological game of that he played with the coin, the psychological manipulation that he underwent in addition to the physical abuse made it a really powerful origin. Wait, hold on a second. I'm just going on ranting about how much I love this story. What was the specific question again?
The fact that Long Halloween pretty much takes the entire Harvey Dent origin
and
condenses it into this.
Now I can pretend like I was getting a point somewhere. When I read, I was, how the hell old was I? I was about 12 when I read that story, and Long Halloween came out. Short next year. I was so jazzed by Long Halloween reading it because it was like I was interested in Two-Face. I liked their Halloween specials, and when I started seeing them bringing in the Eye of the Beholder stuff, I got really excited because at that point I sort of figured if this book got collected, Eye of the Beholder was collected as a notable Two-Face story, then more people would have known about it. So I was sort of thought, oh, I see what he's doing. He's bringing in all these elements. And as the more it went on, the more he never really panned them out anywhere. Loeb never really panned out the references from Eye of the Beholder. Like, he brought in the father, briefly mentioned the father, and gave the implication that the father was bad news in some way.
Right, but doesn't go into the specifics of what he used the coin for. There's never even dramatized a confrontation with the father in the Long Halloween.
And that's a real loss because Harvey Dent in the Long Halloween, look, everyone, it is the most popular comic version, maybe the most popular take on the Two-Face origin. But I honestly have never felt like it's ever addressed his mental illness. It never addressed just why he went crazy, why he snapped. Why the hell is he speaking in a second voice all of a sudden and saying we? Long Halloween never addresses that. He just suddenly is, because that's what Two-Face does.
Yeah, it's expected.
They have to have a lot of Calendar Man scenes, so they just...
Yeah, no, you need it.
You know?
Yeah, no, you needed that. You needed that.
Yeah.
I don't dislike the Long Halloween's take on Harvey. I'm actually glad that it's been a major source of exposure for people to see the character as District Attorney Harvey Dent, not just a supervillain. I think that's cool. I think that's key to why he's an interesting character, that he had a whole other life. But by removing the personal, emotional, and psychological aspects of what he was actually going through, beyond just, I gotta take down the mob for reasons. I have a problem with crime. And the acid in the face, it really felt like I was frustrated how reductive it was to take these things from this rich story that I came to realize few people remembered, Eye of the Beholder, and not actually take them anywhere other than the cosmetic references. That has increasingly bothered me. Again, in the years have gone by, and we haven't even seen Eye of the Beholder reprinted. We only saw it reprinted one other time in a very expensive collection of Two-Face stories for a 75th anniversary that no one's going to buy because it's a really friggin' expensive. Well, yes, of course you would. I bought it too.
Yeah. It's like me. Me.
I both own it.
I bought it too, but still, it's not even available digitally on Comixology. It's that issue. Other issues of Batman Annual have been digitally, preserved in an easily accessible way online, but that never has. Even though a digital version of the story is available in the collection, you can't buy the individual issue. The only way to get the individual issue is to, go through back issues or do sketchy things.
Is it on DC Universe?
Nope.
Oh,
no.
Wow.
I checked.
Wow.
So that's just how, to me, that just says how obscure it is. If it's not even worth reprinting, only time I ever see it get mentioned is in stuff like top 10 Two-Face stories, which he doesn't often get lists dedicated to him like that. But when he does, it's usually on there, right neck and neck with Long Halloween. But no one. But I really could sing the praises of this comic, Eye of the Beholder, for so long. To me, it is just one of my very, very favorite stories, with a really rich and interesting early take on building off of Frank Miller's Year One. And it also, I think it might have also have been, the next step after they did The Killing Joke, which was to have a villain-centric deconstruction of like the Joker. And they did them with some of the other villains as the movies came out. They did like Penguin Triumphant, which was which was another great story that has also been largely forgotten, and so on and so on. And I feel like that Two-Face one, Eye of the Beholder, was probably meant to be, we've established who the Joker is now in this post-crisis era after Frank Miller. Now let's figure out who Two-Face really is and nail it, and this will stick. And in a way it did, but in a way everything else was, it was Jeph Loeb went, I'll take this, I'll take this, I'll take this, I'll take this, mine now. And he ended up being the one to define the character for audiences, for generations.
Or at least get the credit for that.
At least get the credit. So yeah, that's another reason I've had a hard time trying to take Long Halloween on its own merits, even aside from all the things it's already pulling from, and some of the other, I feel like the dialogue is kind of hacky, to be honest. Jeph Loeb's dialogue, but even I could probably
when it's direct list from The Godfather, I'm like,
yeah. And characters never finish a sentence. They always start saying someone's name with a ellipses, and then that's ellipses are all over the place. But I would enjoy it probably better if it weren't for how it mismanages and erases Eye of the Beholder at the same time. So
gotcha.
Yeah.
Now, Zach, you've read Eye of the Beholder as well.
Oh yeah, I have it in I guess all of its printing. So I've got the original comic. I have the Batman Forever tie-in with Two-Face and Riddler, and I do have the expensive 75th anniversary Two-Face thing. I just couldn't resist that. So yeah, it is the I get the better story in general. It definitely is a little bit, I guess, more of an intimate story for Harvey. And I guess I just never realized how derivative all of this stuff is from the Long Halloween. And I'll still say I am a fan of it. And like John, I'm happy that it has, brought future generations this kind of connection to Two-Face and introducing them to the character and this origin of Two-Face within the story where he is Harvey Dent first. I think that is really important. But yeah, it does feel kind of shady that there's just is not a lot of credit or love given to the story where those ideas appeared first. And yeah, I do think that it is a more powerful story because of the actual connection to Harvey Dent's father and his confrontation with him at the end. And I feel like I like the ending of Eye of the Beholder better because Harvey is fixed momentarily. Like his face is fixed, but he makes this like decision. Well, Two-Face, like basically you see that, he's not well still on the inside, and he turns himself back into Two-Face. I don't know how you can undo plastic surgery in a way with just your hands that you look exactly the same again, like it was just silly putty sitting on top. But I think that's more powerful that he has. We've gone past the point of like, well, just get him plastic surgery and he'll be just fine. It kind of also, addresses that issue that we've brought up on here before too. But yeah, I really like that story, and I'm glad that John has continued to uphold or touting that as like the better story. And I remember reading more about it on About Faces, and it reminded me of it because honestly, I probably read The Long Halloween first, and then I found that Batman tie-in book afterwards, and I was like, oh man, this is a really cool story, and I don't know, I like the artwork a little bit better in it. I know that's sacrilege to say now, like that I like it better than the Tim Sale stuff, but I don't know. I just I like it better, and I think it's the better Two-Face story overall.
Yeah. Andrew, now that you've sort of seen a lot of these comparisons with this comic, how do you feel? Obviously, there's not a lot of hidden sources. On this one.
I haven't read Eye of the Beholder, so I can't say much about that. But I mean, your case is strong, Ben, and John's case. So it seems like there's a lot being pulled from that comic. But I do kind of have to ask, if we say Eye of the Beholder, a lot of it comes from this one. Is Eye of the Beholder's drawing from something else? How further back in the rabbit hole do we go?
Right.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. Totally. You know? Totally. Absolutely fair question.
Yeah, because some of this is like, it's the evolution of the story anyway, in some ways.
Yeah.
Eye of the Beholder is an evolution of the original Two-Face origin.
Yeah.
As well. And then you could say any sort of reboot, if they do another reboot of Batman, that in itself is taking off from the previous reboot, the reboot before that, and the reboot before that, before we finally get to Bob Kane and Bill Finger. And before Bob Kane and Bill Finger, we get the Shadow, and before the Shadow, we get all sorts of Scarlet Pimpernel. Like,
so Eye of the Beholder definitively does a few new things.
Yeah,
100%. Okay,
with the Two-Face origin.
Okay, copy that. So I guess there is some credit to be given there for sure. Then.
But it is a good question in terms of like how much of this is just the pure evolution of comics, where it's just like, oh, you're just going to like, how could you ignore the previous thing that came on? You should build off of that. It's hard to do a Batman origin story without building off of what came before in the past 80 years or so. So I can see that. I think for me personally, it's less of the fact that it takes from it and more of the fact that a lot of the credit is given to Long Halloween as opposed to this one. If there was at least more promotion of this storyline so that fans could get both and then decide for themselves, then I probably wouldn't have as much of an issue, or it wouldn't feel as much of an injustice. But when this has pretty much been locked up to obscurity to the point where I kind of wonder if it's deliberate, then I'm like, it just doesn't feel right when I hear Long Halloween get praised for something that it didn't start. It definitely promotes it. It definitely puts it into the mainstream Batman fandom. So I can give credit to that, but it's kind of a shame when especially when Batman fans are so much about like, get Bill Finger the credit and he's the real one who started all that type of stuff. It's kind of sad when that hasn't quite carried over into this stuff, when just certain elements of Two-Face's story that we kind of take for granted as the modern Two-Face story, with the abusive father, the coin coming from his father, those sorts of elements, those are still credited to the Long Halloween. The rooftop scene in itself, obviously, if the Nolans just happened, if they read the Long Halloween and didn't read Eye of the Beholder, of course they're going to credit Long Halloween. But it's less of a criticism of them and more of the culture that was created before they even got to that.
The availability.
The availability of it. And part of me just wonders, is it deliberate on DC's part in terms of just saying like, well, we know Long Halloween sells, let's just forget about this other stuff that happened beforehand.
Well, Ben, it's like you were saying, you were talking about the Frank Miller connections. Frank Miller, Loeb has, all of his Batman stories have just gone for every single original detail that Frank Miller had and tried to bring them in. I think, pretty much every original character Frank Miller introduced makes an appearance in Long Halloween or Dark Victory. And elements like Hush's entire thing is tied to Harvey Dent with his bandaged face and Harvey maybe being Hush and all that. But those stand up because arguably stand up because Frank Miller is iconic still. Those stories are constantly reprinted. They are on the shelves and the recommendations alongside Long Halloween. So I wish Eye of the Beholder had that kind of prestige. And I think part of the reason why it doesn't is because the writer was Andrew Helfer should have been a superstar. I love his stuff. He wrote a run on The Shadow, which was really weird and dark and controversial and interesting. And he edited Legends of the Dark Knight. He edited Justice League International. Really interesting guy with a career that's known by the people who are inside comics, but not a star name. And Chris Sprouse went on to become a more famous artist with a refined, clean style. But back then, he was just starting out, and it's such a rough. I like his art too, Zach. He himself hates his art in that story. He does not like talking about it. It's brought up in some interviews, and he just kind of shrugs it aside because compared to what his art has become, it looks rough.
Artists generally hate their old shit, though.
Yeah.
You know, it's pretty common.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
So, but between the, I think it didn't have the star power or the eye-catching enough art to make it, catch on. So that's, I think, a big reason why it fell into obscurity. It didn't have a Frank Miller. It didn't have an Alan Moore. It didn't even have a Denny O'Neil at the helm, other than as an editor. If it had those things, we might be talking about it different, but that's the way of comics. So much of a story's endurance depends on the creator, or especially the artist, whether or not the story is, good or not sometimes.
Right. Yeah, I can see that. And then it's also kind of like if The Long Halloween didn't exist and he didn't draw off the Eye of the Beholder stuff, how much would that change things and stuff? Would this it probably would still be an obscure comic, but then the stuff that it contributed, how much of that would be buried?
Yeah.
Would we be talking about completely different Two-Face stuff? Would we be talking about completely different views on Falcone? I think Falcone would just be a forgettable mobster from year one.
Yeah.
At that point, all that type of stuff. He wouldn't be in the Nolan movies. He wouldn't be in the Batman. This comic did make an impact, as much as it seems like, okay, it's definitely derivative, but it contributed so much. It's kind of weird that it sort of needed to happen at the same time. Otherwise, it completely changes everything that happens afterwards, as derivative as it is. Even though it comes from other sources, you kind of needed something to show those ideas. So that's kind of my view on it as well. Here. But one thing I do want to get to is, we've acknowledged in this podcast then that, hey, Long Halloween takes its mob stuff from The Godfather. It takes the mystery ending from Presumed Innocent. It takes, I Believe in Harvey Dent and the idea of Batman inspiring criminals from The Dark Knight Returns. It takes the origin of Two-Face from Eye of the Beholder. What the hell does it even originate? So from what I can see, the biggest contribution is kind of what I talked about earlier, which is Carmine Falcone and the downfall of the mob and the rise of the Rogues Gallery becoming a major point in the Batman's career. Now, talking about the contributions of Falcone might seem a little weird at first because comic fans know that Falcone doesn't start in this comic. He starts in year one from Frank Miller and Master Kelly. But I want to emphasize it's specifically establishing Carmine Falcone as the big bad of the city in the beginning of Batman's career. This is not actually evident in year one. We think of Falcone from like Batman Begins, where he's the main mobster that Bruce comes back to take down. But in year one, he's really not that big. He is in the comic, and he's mainly called the Roman, but I'd argue the corrupt police department are bigger villains in the year one comic, to the point where when Frank Miller co-wrote that year one script with Aronofsky that we reviewed on this podcast, the Roman is not even in it. Falcone is not even in the script. That's how much of a non-entity it was to Frank Miller, it seems. The Long Halloween also even gave the Roman a name. Now, year one has a panel where a character addresses him as Falcone, but he's not even in the panel. And it takes we sort of take for granted that he's talking to the Roman there, but that wasn't always the case. It just seems like he's talking to somebody named Falcone, but it doesn't necessarily connect the Falcone name to the Roman. And we actually see this in another comic. In Secret Origins number 50, this is Ted Grant, Wildcat, saying, quote, "This creep Falcone is no mayor, just another of the Roman stooges," implying the Roman and Falcone are two completely different people. And Falcone is the name of the corrupt mayor in year one. So Loeb is just basically saying, well, there's somebody named Falcone in here. I'm going to assume that the Roman is Falcone here. And that's how we get Carmine the Roman Falcone. Carmine, of course, is the name that Loeb gives, either as a reference to Andrew's favorite, Carmine Infantino, who's here on the left.
One of my heroes, dude.
Or there's another Godfather mobster named Carmine Cuneo, who's the guy who gets shot in the revolving door and is also a mobster with a mustache who wears a rose on his lapel. Also, there is a character named Don Falcone in The Godfather. Just pointing that out.
Oh my god.
But he's in charge of Los Angeles, not Gotham City. But anyway, it's the Long Halloween then that establishes the Carmine Falcone we know, the big bad of Gotham's old days, and that carries over into Batman Begins, into Gotham, into Justice League Action even, the Telltale games, and the upcoming movie The Batman with John Turturro in it. But the idea that this is the big guy to take down and how he's going to get, the throne will be usurped by the Rogues Gallery, that is pretty much where I think the Long Halloween should get the credit for in terms of its contribution to the mythos, if anything else, and as well as highlighting a lot of the ideas that sure other people came up with, but it's sort of made more famous. So knowing all this, let's then answer the question: is the Long Halloween overrated? So what do you guys think? Let's start with Zach this time.
I don't know. You've made me think about this a little bit more now. It was going to be a very strong yes after we talked for a long time, and this is coming from somebody who is, I would say I still am a fan of that story, and I still am a fan of Dark Victory and Haunted Night. I think it is overrated, but I also think that it is important. Like we said, Eye of the Beholder is just like one part of it, and I think it's an important part of comic book history in that it has inspired so many of like the recent films and storylines therein. So I think it's important that it exists. I do think it's a little bit overrated. I actually especially felt that way after watching the animated film. Maybe it's because even the animated films can never quite reach my experience when reading these for the first time. It's like it never quite hits the mood, which I think it's kind of individualized. It's everyone's perspective is going to be different, but it just never quite hits the same for me whenever I am seeing the animated film compared to the comic book. So even the animated film I thought was like, this is not as interesting as I thought it was. Not that it was a bad film or anything, but overall, I think the story is not as good as I think people make it out to be. I think it has very important ideas. Just like we said, it's the biggest idea being, not only the introduction of Two-Face, but the rise of the Rogues Gallery. I think that's a really important idea and storyline in the Batman mythos. But I do think it is, as we've seen, very derivative of multiple sources of other media. And it's just, there are better Batman stories out there. So it's an important Batman story. But yes, I do think that now I can say it as an adult, not high school version of me or middle school version of me. Whenever I first read this, it is a little bit overrated.
All right. The very long Droween.
Okay.
What do you think after we've gone over all these different sources?
Yeah, I'd say it's a little overrated, especially the Godfather lifts really bring it down a few notches for sure. It's just a bit too much there. Also, there's something kind of disconnected from the Gilda, who is the killer story, and this meta, the crime lords, the gangsters are going down and being replaced by the supervillains. Those two ideas are in there, but I don't know. How do you guys feel about that? It's just a little bit, there's something they don't I guess they directly could, I don't know. There's something they're not woven together as strongly as they probably could. And then
maybe if the mobsters if it wasn't Holiday, is that what you meant?
I was just going to say, if it wasn't left so damn ambiguous in the comic, I think the idea is that Gilda is, what's the word I'm looking for? She's unintentionally giving a rise to the freaks. If we're saying that Gilda is like the main holiday killer, and she's doing that, if we're saying that, if she's doing that because she wants Harvey to stop working, to stop being like the DA, to stop his war on crime, if she's doing that to take away his focus on his crusade of justice so that he can be with her and make a family, she is unintentionally creating not only Two-Face in a way, but she's also given into the rise of the freaks with these attacks on the crime family. So I think you could look at it that way, is that it is, as much as we're saying it's overrated, it could be interwoven if it's not so left ambiguous as to if Gilda's the killer or not. I think maybe then there's a connection there.
Actually, I'm going to cede my argument there. I think that's what it is. I didn't make that connection until you spelled it out for me. So thank you for that.
Hell, I'm making it. I mean, yeah, it's ambiguous in the comic, but
if it is Gilda, then yes, I think that does make sense. And it's like, look what you have wrought with your maybe what could have been. Well, I guess it wasn't good intentions, but she wanted one thing, and then it spiraled into supervillains. Yeah. So, I guess that's it. I remember when I read the comic, which was not that long ago, guys. I read it pretty late in the game. I did not read this in high school or whatever the fuck. I read it like a year ago for the first time. You get to that splash page of all the villains at the end, right?
Ooh, yes.
Yeah.
And I remember being underwhelmed as fuck. I didn't give a fuck about it.
Wow, really?
I was like, this is stupid. I don't like this. Why is this the best thing ever? But you have to have some comic literacy, I guess, that I didn't have at the time, or I don't know what it is, but
or it's overrated.
Yeah, maybe. I felt like that splash page was supposed to be like, here it is, motherfucker, and it was like, I don't give a fuck. Like I was into Gilda, I was into Two-Face and their deal, I was into Calendar Man, which didn't fucking pan out to goddamn anything. This last splash page, I don't care. I don't care about that. So that was kind of my takeaway. That being said, I did like the overall style of the animated movies. Like, it's kind of directed well, I thought. And them having a concerted effort to remove the Godfather influence was a good thing. And the music was cool. And I liked the heavy lines around them, too, like a real comic book style. But, but the, not that it's the best thing ever. It doesn't have that splash thing either at the end, right? In the movie,
I think it does.
It does.
It has a pan, like a with a pan.
It's a pan. It's the closest.
It's a little bit better than, I don't know. Something about that was okay to me, I guess. But
they're not striking a pose. Yeah,
they're not striking a pose. So I was like, it's pretty cool. So I don't know. Yeah, I guess I'm done, guys. Ben, we're gonna end on John, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So
all right.
Is the Long Halloween overrated? This is the most loaded question. Personally, of course, I think so, and I think I think the answer really it goes back to being subjective. It all depends on it depends on a number of factors, like when you read it, how much you cared about Batman when you read it, how much you read other stories when you read it, and just where you took it emotionally with you from there. For me, again, I read it when I was young enough to really feel it. I rode the wave when it came out. It was like my equivalent of Twin Peaks and X-Files. I mean, I watched X-Files too, but it was water cooler. It was water cooler discussion when it came out. And without that element of waiting each month for the story, I'm kind of surprised it's carried on being so popular. It's one thing to watch a show when you're watching episode to episode, but now it's the binge problem where you can just go through it all. It's not the same effect, but somehow it still continues to be popular. So obviously it has something else going for it. And it's not just that DC pushes it; people find it and they're receptive to it.
Mm-hmm.
And for a lot of those people, it is their first Batman comic.
Mm-hmm.
It's commonly available in bookstores. My girlfriend, who's already huge into Batman, she found it at Hot Topic when the Nolan films came out.
God. Wow.
That's how common it was. It reached people in ways that most comics did not, do not, and still can't. And because of that, for me to sit here and call it overrated, me who's read all these things from such an early age and knows all this stuff, it's almost like gatekeeping and snobbery. I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be that guy.
I see.
I mean,
yeah.
I'm gonna. It is condescending to say, but I sort of feel like that it's like baby's first Batman. But there's nothing wrong with that, honestly. You got to start somewhere, and if you start with a comic, if you're actually reading a comic, that's cool. That's cool. And I used to be bitter about it, a lot more bitter and angry about like Eye of the Beholder getting erased, but as time has gone on, I've realized, as I said, that this story was important for getting people into the Rogues, getting people into the relationships of Batman and Jim Gordon, Harvey Dent as a supporting character, a heroic figure. They got that from this book, regardless of whether this book got it from. That's still where these readers got it. And the best thing I can do is encourage them to read the more stories. Please dig in. There's a whole history of stuff I'd love you to read, and I hope they do. A lot of people will pick this up. They'll think it's interesting, and they'll never pick up another comic again unless it's recommended or becomes a movie again or something.
Sure.
But if it brings some people into the comics and to Batman and to dig through the other stuff, that's great. That's wonderful. So, is it overrated? It really depends on what it meant to you. And there's another factor, which is that some people don't want to intellectually engage with and dig through the layers of the story. There are people who don't think about and don't care to think about the twist, maybe about Gilda maybe or maybe not making sense, because it doesn't matter. The twist was the twist. They accept it and they go, that was cool. And they don't think about it.
True.
And it can annoy the hell out of me, but it's okay. You are free to dig in as much as you want or not. And for a lot of those fans, Long Halloween is an emotional experience. It's about riding the operatic waves of Tim Sale's artwork and those big splash pages, and even the big rogues thing at the end, which did nothing for you, Drew. Which I think is
I'm sorry, everybody on the internet.
No. I think
I think it's hilarious.
I think it's hilarious. Kind of cool that you weren't emotionally swept up in that. Like, I imagine most readers would go, "This is so awesome! I don't have to stop and think about all the rogues." I mean, if you stop and think about all the rogues, like, we're gonna wait in a tableau for the Roman to show up at any second. But
who's the killer? The whodunit aspect, the detective aspect of it, is a lot more interesting to me. Then, it's cool that the villains are taking over. They've amped up the level, but it just doesn't feel like that should be the point of the comic. And also, the other thing is, like you just said, John, how you come into this comic. I came into this after seeing all the Nolan movies and everything else, and on all these lists, like best Batman comic of all time. So my expectations are through the fucking roof, and it ends on this stupid splash page. I don't care. It's just my expectations were way too high.
When I was 13 and I was reading this, it felt like, I came out with Batman the Animated Series being the gold standard. The regular Batman comics at the time weren't giving me what I wanted the way Batman the Animated Series did.
I see, yeah.
And when I read Long Halloween, it felt like Batman the Animated Series, but now you're older, you're cooler, you're edgier, you're darker. This is what you graduate to. And that's what it felt like at the time.
Gotcha.
And so, there's that is an emotional aspect that some people can have when they read the story, whatever emotional aspect they have, that you can't criticize. You can't you can't logically criticize someone's love for something as to a certain point. And believe me, I've tried.
Like Batman Forever.
Subjective.
Hey, I love that movie. I love that movie.
Because we are fans.
Yeah.
So that's the problem with. I consider it overrated, but whether or not it is, I cannot say because it's not my place to say.
Overrated doesn't necessarily mean you don't like it either. You just feel everybody likes it too much more than they should. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't like it.
Yeah.
I really do wish my biggest problems ultimately are, I think the only thing that really bothers me is the way it changed Gilda forever. Because I feel like Gilda Dent was a very important character who represented her relationship with Harvey Dent, especially during her few appearances in the 80s, was a really powerful metaphor for loving someone struggling with mental illness or struggling with addiction.
Okay.
And she was this character who could see through the man inside the monster, but at the same time also didn't accept the monster, and would lay boundaries and not be with him until he reformed. Mm-hmm. And she would wait for him in a way, and she'd always be there. Even as a friend, she would be there for him. And I always found that beautiful and heartbreaking. And because of the way she's changed, the whole dynamic is changed because now she is part of the monsters as well. She's part of the freaks and the evil and the darkness that pulled Harvey Dent down. Mm-hmm. And now she's known and defined as a femme fatale, as a dangerous woman. The Long Halloween movie came out this year, and an issue of Batman in Black and White both did separate versions of Gilda Dent, the dark, manipulative killer. Mm-hmm. And that is who she is now. And that's the part that really, more than anything else, I just can't let go of right now. That still stays with me with Long Halloween's legacy. And I wish Gilda could have a chance to go back to having that unique dynamic of loving a man struggling with a monster, of loving a partner dealing with mental illness or drug addiction, because Two-Face ticks that metaphorically as well. Mm-hmm. And I miss that. That right there is my only other problem with the story at this point. So
gotcha.
That's it, basically.
I gotta follow John on this. This is my problem when I'm in charge of the order. I mean, I agree with a lot of what has been said here on it. So if I'm going to contribute anything, it's something that I think, Andrew, that you brought up offline, where just like some of the best, considered the best Batman stories are considered the best, not necessarily because of how good the story is so much as the ideas presented in it. And I think this one has a lot of fantastic ideas presented, with the Rogues Gallery taking over from the mobsters, a Hannibal Lecter type thing with Arkham Asylum, Two-Face's origin being as part of this, Batman having to do detective work and that type of stuff. All those types of things all in one package with art that, I think, John, you said very well, which is the Tim Sale art kind of feels like the adult Batman the Animated Series in a way, and this is what you graduate to, and all done through something that these days we see like, we spot the influence on the Nolan stuff when we read it, all those things. I think that overall emotional experience is what rates it for that high, even though we can spend all day ripping apart where certain elements come from, or how good or not good the mystery is, or whether or not you had an emotional reaction to the splash page at the end, any of those sorts of things. The fact that it had those elements and showed up and was, for many people, their first comic or their first experience finding out who Harvey Dent was in the first place, or of establishing the character of Carmine Falcone so that he could be the first baddie of Batman Begins, those sorts of things. Like, is it overrated as a story? It seems like all of us are sort of in agreement on that, but is it overrated in terms of its impact on the Batman mythos? I would say the answer is not at all, because of the fact that it was so influential. We see so much of that influence on it, and it kind of, as I said earlier, it kind of has to exist. It has to exist in order to give birth to all these other things that it influenced. And I would rather be in a world where it does exist, where there is some popular form of Two-Face's origin, than a world where, oh, Two-Face got an origin called Eye of the Beholder, but nobody uses him anymore, and he's just kind of an obscure villain. It's like that type of stuff. So between those, I'd rather go with this one. If I had a main issue, it's the fact that the original sources aren't given enough credit, but I feel like that's also something that's not completely the comics' fault so much as the fault of DC Comics for not really acknowledging the Eye of the Beholder or promoting that one as much. I just wish that was as available so that comic fans can read both versions and just come away with like, okay, I like this one better or that one better, or at least know this is where those ideas came from, so that they can judge for themselves on that. Because there's probably some people who've read both and they still prefer the Long Halloween because they like having more of the Rogues Gallery in that, or they like having Falcone, or they like the Godfather references and that type of stuff, and it doesn't bother them. And that's completely fine on that, but at least give them the chance so that we don't have stuff that is just flat out inaccurate, which is how these ideas originated from there when it didn't really originate from there. That doesn't take away from your enjoyment from the story whatsoever. I don't think any of us are saying you shouldn't be fans of it. We do, however, like to put an emphasis on where the origins come from on it. And so some promotion or acknowledgement of the original sources, I think, would go a long way on that. But that is pretty much where I stand on it. So that is superhero stuff you should know. All right, so we have a few fan comments from everybody, but before that, I want to thank our research assistant, Dan, for gathering the visuals, especially the Godfather comparisons, but the comparisons in general. So thanks a lot, Dan, for that. Let's now go into some of the fan comments. So we have our first one from Down North, who commented on our sort of community posting on our previous episode about how why Bruce Wayne doesn't he just use his will to stop crime in Gotham City. Down North commented saying, it needs Bruce Wayne more than anything. Okay, so be prepared for yourself.
I read this one.
Batman is the worst superhero ever. He literally goes around and beats up on the mentally ill and poor. Why do I say that? Because all the people in his rogues gallery don't go to jail. They go to a mental institute in a freaking asylum. And all the people in his rogues gallery... Oh, wait, sorry, I already read that. All the henchmen that he beats on the most are poor, taking a job as a henchman. Bruce Wayne can literally hire everybody in Gotham, giving everybody a living wage because he's like the richest person in DC Comics. But no, he spends millions of dollars driving a tank in a personal Batjet and crashes into buildings costing millions of repairs. That is the definition of privilege. So like I said, Batman is the worst hero, and P.S. Why has social services investigated? I think he means not investigated the death of one of his orphans that he adopted. Jason Todd. If only we had an hour-and-a-half episode where we addressed every single one of these points, guys.
Yeah.
Had to put it on the books, Ben. We got to take care of that.
This is a classic example of somebody that commented and didn't watch the fucking episode.
Yeah.
You know?
I wish we addressed all of these in detail. Either that or this person's being sarcastic. I don't know.
It doesn't seem sarcastic.
It's hard to read that intention.
Yes. So,
well, thank you for your comment.
That's
thank you
right.
for your comment. Hopefully you actually watched the episode at some point. Next person did watch the episode, and that is a good fan of the podcast, Green Arrow, a.k.a. Robert Schumann, saying Gotham needs Batman to save the citizens of Gotham, but Gotham needs Bruce Wayne because he's a genius, playboy, billionaire philanthropist. There are a couple of villains that are left out of our episode: the Mad Hatter, Killer Croc, Clayface, and Man-Bat, and Harley Quinn. That is true. So, real quick, if we're talking about how the Rogues Gallery would still exist even if Bruce Wayne was a philanthropist as opposed to Batman, Mad Hatter also doesn't turn to crime due to economic reasons. Yes, Killer Croc is poor, but also doesn't turn to crime for money so much as fighting society for treating him the way he looks. So, maybe he could have gotten extensive treatment if Bruce had paid for it, but that's a maybe. Clayface in different versions happens because either Basil Karlo gets recast in a movie remake, or Matt Hagen comes across goop in a cave, or gets force-fed all the stuff in the animated series.
Yeah.
But none of the Clayfaces are really that financially driven. And Man-Bat was a science experiment gone wrong, and Harley fell for the Joker, which also doesn't really have anything to do with, needing a job, because she was already employed. So that's pretty much what we got for those. And then last comment comes from the Ben Cave episode we got here. Wow. This is from Nathan Wade. on it saying, quote, "I'm way too late, and you just keep saying it wrong, but it is Willem Dafoe, not William. Stop saying Willem's name wrong." And then a comment underneath saying, "Stop saying William Dafoe." Well, you know what? My apologies, sir, if I've mispronounced your name, but let's bring you on real quick and ask you, how do you pronounce your name?
William Dafoe.
All right, well, that definitely clears things up.
I'll be damned. Have I been saying it wrong all this time?
This is not right, though. He's fucking with us. This is Willem Dafoe fucking with us.
So that's what we got. Anyways, thank you for your comments.
That's
My mind is blown.
I knew how to say it. I'm surprised I didn't call you on that, Ben, when
I never corrected
there.
Ben. I was just letting him say it, but now maybe I'm wrong.
All of us are wrong, including the man himself. So, on that note,
Jesus
on
Christ.
to Andrew with the Patreon.
It's Willem Dafoe in my heart, but all right. So, thank you for those wonderful comments, everybody. And thank you to our Patreon supporters who include Shastas Leomo, Super Emperman, Douglas P, Dan D, Aaron Willett, Nick Noir, Jesse E, Jeffrey R, Scott V, Askers Webb, Jeremy H, Alex of the What Mean Podcast, Ian Justice, Jared P, Paul C, Jamie H, Rochelle L, and Tara M. And I can't wait for the day, guys, when we have so many. We'll just be like, here's the list, and they fucking go like in some YouTubers do, some other YouTubers do. That'll be nice. But until that day comes, thank you guys for being our Patreon supporters. Do appreciate it. And also our other supporters, Spark Again, STCT Productions, Robert Schumann, Kooky Noms, Matt Herring, Elijah B, Shamrock Balls, Ian H, Walter the Robot, John Wells, Rye Guy, Jackson Putnam, and Tway N. Please join the Shasta Army. That's the $1 tier at patreon.com/superherostuffpod. Get you the $1 shout out. Then we also have the $5 tier, which is the whole other show, everybody. $5 a month. Cancel anytime. And then and it's Deeper Dives every Friday. This show is every Monday. So you get us twice a week if you pay the $5 tier. And then we got the $10 tier, which is our monthly live show, our monthly meetup. And we all meet up online, and it's like a Zoom, but it's not Zoom. Anyway, we will react to shit all together live, and it feels like we're in person. So, so yeah,
as close as possible,
as close as we can get. So anyway, yeah, and we also have Superhouse merch, superhousepod.redbubble.com, superherostuffpod.threadless.com, mugs, shirts, shower curtains. We're still working on the art for one of those sites for Zach. So it'll happen one day. It's too funny every week. I think I'm not doing it just because it's funny. Anyway, please send us some audio. I'm ashamed to the audience for not sending us anything lately. Superhousepodcast@gmail.com. Send us something, please. Got to ring the fucking shame bell from Game of Thrones for everybody. But anyway, please animate our... Well, we don't have sketches lately anymore, but...
Yeah, don't worry about it.
Yeah, fuck it.
We only have like 4 hours worth from the backlog.
Yeah,
so.
If you go into the backlog, fucking animate our sketches. No one's even noticed they're gone. Anyway, Thunderwolf Drew on Instagram and Twitter. That's me. Thunderwolf lives on YouTube. Check that out. ThunderwolfDrew.com as my portfolio. You can see my work there, which is practical effects behind the scenes photos mainly. And it does have my video portfolio there as well, which is going to soon include Amano Recon, which is AMANORECON. Go to amanorecon.com, and that is the artwork is by Zach Atavius right here. Fucking awesome artwork. And it's going to be an R-rated sci-fi horror comedy, and it will have like a tone similar to Stranger Things, but have like a Power Rangers influence as well. It's not a fan film though, it's original. So remember that, and as you can see from the poster, we got aliens in this shit, and stay tuned for that. More things coming your way for that very soon, and it's going to be on Indiegogo, which is like Kickstarter, but for indie films. So we're going to have contributions. We're going to be opening up for campaign contributions at some point in the future. Ben?
Shout out to Comic Capital on Instagram, as well as the Everything Entertainment Club on Clubhouse. You can follow our social media in the meantime. Twitter, we are Superhouse Pod. Instagram, Superhero Stuff Pod. TikTok, Superhero Stuff Pod. And we're on Vero as well on Superhero Stuff Pod. My website is Ben Juan Ryder, and my YouTube channel is in the description below. You can also check out Early Bird at earl-e-bird.com. You can follow me on Instagram at Ben Juan Ryder, as well as my son's Instagram, my cat, Alfie, at Alfie Pennyworth Cat. And if you have an Alfie yourself or any other sort of cat like the co-hosts here, then you can get Whiskerbox, the only cat box for the crazy cat lady and gent, where you can get a special gift box for your cat every single month. And if you don't have a cat but you have a dog, then you can get the Barkbox, y'all, because that's what we talked about in the promo. So the
for
Barkbox,
your canine,
for
your pooches, your hounds,
your hounds.
Yes. So you can use the link in our affiliate link, which is in our website, in order to get the first month off free, valued at $35, in order to get the Barkbox for your dog every single month. You can also check out the rest of our affiliate links at superherostuffpod.com/shop. We got eBay, we got Amazon, we got Whisper Bidets, I think, still. But anyways, we have a whole bunch of stuff. So
yeah, we got
check that out. And over to you, Zach.
Well, if you would like to see more from me, like my artworks, you can go to ZacharyJacksonBrownArt.com. And you can also follow me on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Also, look for Zachary Jackson Brown Art. I am taking a bit of a hiatus from comic book characters right now. It's October, so I'm really just doing horror movie characters at the moment. But I'm sure I'll get back around to Batman very soon, as usual. I've already got commissions for Keaton just beating at the door, so...
just left and right.
Future thumbnails.
Yep, that's right. He'll come back soon enough.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And over to John.
Yep, I can be found on Tumblr and also Twitter at about-faces at Tumblr or Twitter. And I will be linking anything I'm working on. I've got a couple new writing projects that'll be posted, hopefully,
nice.
by the end of the year, talking more about Two-Face's history. And I will hopefully be able to update. I'll be, of course, updating both those with it when that happens. But for right now, that's still where I live. About-faces on Tumblr and also on Twitter.
Awesome. All right. And I think that is about it for this week. I believe. Thank you for joining us for the Long Halloween and answering whether or not it was overrated. The answer is up to you. Took you 2.5 hours to find that out, but that's where we're at.
If you're still listening.
If you didn't shut it off.
Oh, man. And you know what? I want you to do us a favor.
I want you to tell all your friends about us.
Indeed!
Superhero Stuff You Should Know is part of the Greenlit Podcast Network.